Good morning for you, good afternoon for the European listeners, but good morning to all of you. It's the first presentation of the day, so consider it as taking the coffee together and trying to let you dive with me in my region. My region is Brussels, although I think the broader region is Europe, but I will talk you particularly about what we have tried to do in the Brussels region throughout a non-for-profit that we created 5-6 years ago with the name of Brussels Creative. And let me dive into the presentation. The first thing I thought when preparing my presentation is first of all to clarify for some of you what is Brussels all about, because for some of you Brussels might mean this. It might mean the Belgian fries. It might mean the very delicious Belgian chocolate. It can maybe mean for some of you that have been visiting Brussels, the Atomium building that was built during the Universal Exposition in 1985. It might also mean maybe an artist like Marguerite that was painting surrealistic and beautiful paintings in his life. Or it might even mean for some of you that visited our capital, this little man that is peeing and that was built somewhere in our history when the French kings were trying to invade our country. Some other people might think about Brussels throughout the institutions, the European Commission, the European Council, and many other institutions are based in Brussels. And so often people are thinking, that's Brussels. It's some good food, some artistic people, nice people, some institutions. But I think for me, Brussels is much more. It's and I'm going to show you a few pictures from what Brussels is all about. First of all, Brussels, in terms of size, we are not a huge capital. When you think that we are the capital of Europe, we maybe have 1 to 1.4 million inhabitants, so really not that big. I think around 67% of the population are foreigners, so 33% are Belgian people, Brussels people, but 67% are foreigners. What makes it also a very diverse and very challenging, diverse, but also very interesting community that you are crossing when you are operating in Brussels. And Brussels is, for instance, a place that I would always invite you to discover when you visit our city. It's a place called Tour and Taxis. It's about 30 hectares, so quite large. A place that for 60–70% has already been rebuilt. Old warehouses, old logistical center that was built more than 150 years ago, that has been taken over by private funding. That's already an important, I think, matter that you see in many European cities. It's private and public, but I would say often private grassroots initiatives that are reshaping the city. There are, of course, some public investments, but a lot of them, I would still say, are privately funded and the vision developed by some private people and private investors. This Tour and Taxi is a unique location that is fully dedicated to creativity, to culture, to innovation. There is some housing, but very limited, the part on the right of my slide that you see. But most of the places that you can't see in the totality on the left side of the slide are really these old sheds and old warehouses that has been totally revitalized to put creativity, innovation at the center of the development. Brussels is also, and I take a few examples out of them to just illustrate what is all happening in my region. Brussels is also suddenly two young people, Ibrahim on the right, a Moroccan citizen, Julie on the left, a Brussels-based girl, that decided 6–7 years ago to suddenly create in one of the poorest areas of the city an initiative that is called Molen Geek. And Molen Geek, Molen, the first part, is related to the area that is called Molenbeek. So they took part of the name of the area in their initiative. And Geek is all about technology, the geeks that are programming and that are fascinated by technologies. And they are asked to the municipality to which they belong if they could rent or get eventually for free a building in the center of the area. And in that building, they have started some free classes for not only Moroccan, but a lot of, I would say, immigrant population that often have difficulties to access to school and education, or that sometimes are not triggered enough and are spending most of their time on the street without a big perspective. Julie and Ibrahim proposed 6-7 years ago to create Molen Geek, and today they are first of all they have been growing impressively. They have been connected by private companies, by public authorities to support more their initiative, and they are training and helping people. It's thousands of people per year that they manage to attract to their location, to train them and to help them to have a new perspective in their life. So a Molen Geek, a tour and taxi, but also Be Central is an initiative that was set up 4 or 5 years ago in the train station, in the building of the train stations that were also quite empty. A bunch of entrepreneurs proposed to the authorities in Brussels, can we create a big incubation center and training center again for all type of populations that often were either unemployed, either after school, they don't find immediately what they shall be doing. And regularly they are invited to come to Be Central, to create an idea or to collaborate with other people and to promote entrepreneurship. Let me dive further. This is an old military warehouse that was also abundant. And I like that word of abundant. You see in many of our cities, and I guess it's the same in Colombia, but also everywhere in Europe, you see often parts of the city and buildings abundant, temporary, because some procedures needs to be achieved to sometimes revitalize a building. And during that period that you wait for authorizations, you have maybe 4 or 5 years that a building remains empty. What is happening is that often citizens, like this initiative that you see in front of you, it's called CU Square, and it's a citizen initiative that requested to the public authorities, can we get access to that building? Can we give it a new life? I hope you still see my screen. Yep. Can we occupy that place for a couple of years, waiting for the final revitalization that will happen, I think, only by 2026. So temporary activities, grassroots and initiatives that are shaping little by little the region of Brussels. And that is for me the most fascinating part of Brussels. Although we can all like chocolate and we can all be attracted by the European Commission, I think those initiatives are showing the vibrant place that the region of Brussels can be. Myself, as I was introduced, I'm an entrepreneur since I was 18, and I took over a building in 2007, and I created one of the oldest incubators in Brussels. The place is called The Egg, like the shape, the egg. Love. So The Egg Brussels is a 15,000 square meter building that I managed with some friends to acquire partially, and together with public funding and private funding, we revitalized the entire building in a very poor area of Brussels as well. And little by little, we have been creating activities, seminars, meeting points, incubation activities, and all that regenerated some life in that part of Brussels as well. And that's how, through The Egg, how I was, of course, included a lot in the initiative of Brussels Creative, because I'm going to talk to you a bit about what Brussels Creative is all about and how we have been building, thanks to Brussels Creative, an ecosystem. And I know that the theme of this year is talking about creative districts, but also about creative ecosystems. And that part of creating a creative ecosystem is something that we have been working intensively on in Brussels, but also in other cities in Europe that I will highlight for you. So remember, Brussels, much more than what you sometimes think about. For us, the belief, what brought us together to suddenly start up a non-for-profit called Brussels Creative was the fact that we are absolutely convinced that creativity should be or is the engine of our economy. We are in, I think, the 21st century. We are at a moment of our industry and I think even society that many activities needs to be reinvented. The way we live together in cities, the way we work together in companies, the way that we are talking and dealing between politicians, citizens, commercial companies, or even researchers and universities. Education needs to be reinvented. And in all that, we believe that creative mindset is crucial and can be seen as an engine of the economy. There are many studies, and we recently got a study about 2020, where there was an evaluation that was made of the creative and cultural industries, because you know that often we are somehow called the CCI, the creative and cultural industries. What is a number of activities? I think there are 13 different disciplines that have been gathered in this notion of the creative and cultural industries. And when you ask to some economical studies what the value and the employment, the importance of employment is from that industry, they are often indicating that around 5 to 6% of the European GDP is represented by the creative and cultural industries. So are we the biggest? No. Are we the smallest? Also not. But I think we are much more than 5 to 6% of GDP. And we are sometimes, I think the average figure throughout Europe was that we represent 6 to 7% of the employment in Europe. But I think we are much more important than that. We are people. I heard the word resilience in the opening speech. I think we are people, creative people that can think out of the box. I think we can become that engine of the economy. And we are also, we have seen it during the pandemic period. I think we are quite resilient people that can start to reorganize themselves maybe more quickly than others. So that word creativity for me remains very important. And that's why I often like to call about not so much the CCI, but I prefer to talk about the creative economy. I prefer to talk about the creative ecosystem. And we define the role of Brussels Creative to gather the creative economy in one place and to start building bridges amongst the different operators from the creative economy. And that's one of the important roles of Brussels Creative. It is really this creating bridges, and I will explain why that is so important, but also so delicate and difficult when you try to build an ecosystem. So the power that we have, or what makes us so characteristic, and I think important for the future, is that we are capable to step out of our comfort zone. We are capable to think out of the box, and that's what maybe makes us so unique, and what is our common DNA that we want to gather in our ecosystem. We have some beliefs and some fears. You see from where we come. And of course, when we started Brussels Creative, and what we defined a little bit as the context in which we operate, that are our beliefs on one side and our fears on the other side, is first of all that we invited Brussels to all the time stop talking about smart cities, but talk about creative cities. Creative cities are smart cities, but the smart city that has been promoted everywhere in Europe and elsewhere is much related and connected to technologies. And I think we must stop talking about the smart city part, but more about the creative city. And let's see how we can make from Brussels a creative city. That was one of the main missions from Brussels Creative, trying first to develop its creative ecosystem. We feel all a little bit like this girl, a little bit maybe trapped, a little bit. I think we can see in many parts of our society burnouts, depressions. People don't feel that happy anymore sometimes in the city in which they live, and that could be the fact in Brussels as well. We don't like, or we feel a little bit trapped in the companies and the organizations in which we live, where there is not a lot of place and room for creativity and innovation. We are just working in enormous amounts of processes and procedures, and there is a very little place for creativity and innovation. And that makes us feel maybe like that person. And I think even in education, when you go to schools, when you go to universities, where is the room for creativity and innovation? And that's also sometimes how we feel, and that's why we need to reinvent ourselves. We need to think and to operate differently than how it has been done in the 20th century. I think that open innovation, ecosystems, collective intelligence, open innovations are very important terms in which we believe as Brussels Creative, and that openness is something that we also need to work on, because it's not a natural way of behaving. People often close their innovation. We need to invite them to open up, and that's also something that you need to consider when you build the ecosystem, is that many people try to lock themselves up, to not share that much, because they are scared to share some of what things that they are doing with others. And I think an important element that we need to build in our ecosystem is the notion of trust. We need also to, and that were some of our beliefs and also some of our fears, but we are absolutely convinced that if we want to give more power to the creative economy, but also for the future generations, I think we have really to reinvent and rethink our universities and schools. I'm very glad that in Brussels, we have two main big universities, a French one and a Flemish one. And both universities, by the way, both working on the leadership of women. So we have two female rectors since 4 or 5 years' time. They're bringing a total new vision on the way universities should operate. And you see that they are opening their campuses. They start to provide parts of their education in the cities. So stop closing yourself up into a campus, open up your university, connect yourself with the citizens and your own city, what is a much stronger and I think more holistic education that you're going to get out of it. And I know that I jump a bit from one notion to another, but I think it's important that we all share a little bit that common DNA and these common beliefs. And that's what we identify in Brussels, but I will talk to you later about the Creative Ring, that is a number of cities all over Europe that have started to connect themselves because they had these common beliefs. They had this belief to work for, to make the cities creative, the creative cities. They were trying to get access to universities and schools to see how creativity can be integrated back in the programs of the education. So sharing somewhere and somehow these common beliefs and fears, I think, are important, because that's what will drive us and let us work easily together. We also were fighting a lot throughout these educational programs to make sure that art and creativity, I think, can have a much stronger and more important place in future curricula, that you can not only talk about STEM, the science, the technology, the engineering and mathematics, but that there is some place for the A of art, so that you can have really a STEAM kind of approach towards the jobs of the future. We also embrace and are insisting very much in the diversity of our society, in the diversity of our population. Let's make sure that whenever you do something for your city, whenever you gather people, that you stop putting similar people with each other. That's what we saw a lot in previous times in Brussels. Architects are coming together and talk about architectures. Designers come together and they talk about design. Fashion developers come together and they talk about fashion. And media experts are coming together and they talk about media. What if we would, first of all, cross-disciplinary mix all these people, because they all represent the creative economy in our region? So what if we could cross-disciplinary start to mix them, but also make sure that we can mix white, colored people, young, old, men, women? The more we can embrace the diversity, the more creative solutions and a way of thinking we're going to get at the end of our gatherings. We also believe very much, and we underline the fact that our creative ecosystem should be open to stakeholders from the multiple helix. This multiple helix, I think, is a notion that is known all over the world. It's the fact that the stakeholders of a city or a region are often public authorities with the government, the industry, so the business, the academicians and researchers from universities and schools, and the citizens. And I think that collaboration between those four stakeholders from a city, I think, are crucial and important. And in each activity that we did with Brussels Creative in our region, was always trying to make sure that we would have representatives from the different parts of the multiple helix. Very important. Embrace that diversity, embrace the cross-disciplinarity, and make sure that you have representatives from the different stakeholders from your city. Additionally, a very important belief that we had as well was to make sure that something we discovered, and I don't know how that is in the Americas, but in Europe, you see that creative cities are not the typical one that often are very visible to people. You see Paris and Berlin on the left of your screen, but nobody knows what is on the right. It's Saint-Etienne, it's Dresden, smaller cities, post-industrial cities that often had to reinvent themselves much more than the big capitals like Berlin or Paris. And you see that there is an enormous, vibrant ecosystem that is created and that is animating those smaller cities. So the second layer cities in all our countries are very crucial and important, because these are the places where you can find very creative and vibrant ecosystems. And of course, there are some exceptions. I'm talking since the beginning about Brussels. What is the capital of Belgium? But you have some capitals that can play that role, but I wouldn't always end up my vision with the typical suspects to say there is Barcelona, there is Madrid, there is Berlin, and there is Paris. No, go and dive into some smaller cities and you will often get connected to a very more vibrant creative ecosystem. Now, what we, of course, in terms of fears, what the fears that we have in everything that we develop and that we need to be careful about is the more we are opening our cities, the more we are opening our entire society, the more we need to be careful about what is all happening. Because I think those three pictures is just some pictures that illustrate how technologies and the internet, with what is an important element, the technologies and the internet is very crucial when you're building an ecosystem where you try to reinvent your city. It's all about data, it's all about technologies and human beings, for sure. That's why we are here. But these human beings and citizens will start playing with technologies, with the internet and data, and we have to be careful, because today our internet, as it was invented 30 years ago, unfortunately, is controlled by a few gatekeepers. There are a few gatekeepers in America, a few gatekeepers in China, a few in Russia, and they are controlling the entire internet. And that's still, I think, a fear that many of us have. and we need to be careful with it. I think that Tim Berners-Lee, that was one of the inventors of the internet, or he is so called, he wanted to have an internet that was like the picture C, a distributed system. And I think we need to fight all together and not be naive, but we need to fight to come back to a distributed network as a picture for internet rather than a decentralized with a few gatekeepers that are controlling the entire system. And we need also to be careful about our commons, to protect a little bit our commons, because the more we open it, the more we might suddenly be losing an important control on our commons. And you know, commons is about light, it's about wind, it's about water. It's all these elements that defines our commons in a region or a city. We don't need to be naive. We need to be careful about what's happening with our commons. So these are a bit our DNA, our belief, the discussions that were animating our first meetings 6-7 years ago in Brussels Creative. What is our common vision, and what are we fighting for? What are we scared about, and what is the common vision that we have? And based on that, we decided to create that non-for-profit that is called Brussels Creative. And I will try to explain you how we have been building it for 6-7 years, and what's next. What are we going to try to do in the next coming years? But the setup, it took quite some time, because even if we are not a 10 million inhabitants city, we are 1.4 million, and you still need to identify, gather all this creative economy and start playing with, and little by little build something where people care about each other, know each other. There is trust relation that is built amongst the operators from your ecosystem. And what we have been doing since 6-7 years, after a couple of meetings from some believers, I think in the beginning we were 15 to 20 individuals, all having a public or private or academical background. And we were gathering and saying, let's set up a legal structure, a non-for-profit, in which we were in the beginning the 10-15 founders, and open up that platform as soon as possible. But let's start to do some activities to make sure that we can build up that ecosystem. And we defined ourselves, Brussels Creative, like I defined there. It's a platform for the Brussels-based CCI, but let's say creative ecosystem, where we try to gather politicians, researchers, citizens, and business leaders, guiding our regions toward economical growth and innovation. If we come together, there is still a mission. We have a vision, but we have a mission that we try to stimulate the economical growth and the innovation in our region. The important element, of course, was how can we bring all these people together, because the crossover and the cross-disciplinarity is important, and the cross-fertilization. But it all depends from people's attitude. It is not that easy. And what we started to do, and it was one of the first initiatives that we took, and it lasted for 2 years. So during 2 years, nearly every month, I would say 10 times per year, leaving the summer period a little bit open, but 10 times per year, we were proposing once per month a serendipity meeting. And it's very contradictory, as you see, a meeting and serendipity. You could say serendipity normally is not a meeting. It happens because you suddenly meet somebody on the street and it was not planned. But we were trying to force that a little bit. And we said we're going to make meetings every month in a place in Brussels. So there will be a host, what means that you discover new places in your own city. And I guarantee you that you will be surprised how many people don't know their own city. So we were meeting every month in a different place in the city. The host would host us in a place capable to have some meetings. We were 100 people, sometimes we were 300 people, and we would just foresee some nice food and drinks. And we would always invite people to come and talk about a certain theme. So we had a theme that was a bit like cross-disciplinary. and we invite for that team a number of speakers, and we create just a meeting of 2-3 hours where people would come. They come from different disciplines, and I can guarantee you that in the beginning, the first time people came to the Brussels creative meetings, they were looking to each other and sometimes even saying to me, Alan, I don't understand exactly what we are doing here, because we are not used to this. Normally, as I said, architects come together every month. They have an association for architects, and I'm sure that they come regularly together and they share some common discussion. They have some discussions about their industry, their sector. Here, what suddenly happened is that you had all people from different areas and different disciplines coming together, and it was very unusual, because they don't meet the usual people they were always meeting in their own sector. So we organized the serendipity meetings, and to show you don't need to read this, but to show one of the typical meetings that we had was, for instance, the overall umbrella theme was women and innovation. And so I launched the invitation in Brussels, and I say, come together in a very old part of a big museum in Brussels. So it's the Beaux-Arts Lab. So it's a lab in a museum that was still under construction. We put some tables, some chairs. Here we had about 100 people coming together, and the theme was the woman and innovation. So I invite some women to talk about their feeling of innovation and how they try to innovate in their own discipline or sector. And we invite men and women to come together to share some time together, to talk and debate about the central theme, and to see how we can maybe out of that build further our ecosystem. And what happened thanks to these meetings, cross-disciplinary meetings, is that little by little you are building something that is important and crucial when you want to develop an ecosystem, is the notion of trust. Trust is necessary and not easy. When people meet each other for the first time and the second time, little by little, you can see friendships, new relationships, but more importantly, a trust factor. So that you have a common, again, we have a common DNA, we have a common belief, we have a common vision, but little by little, thanks to these regular meetings, we started to build relation and friendship, but based on a trust factor. That is very important, otherwise you cannot build together. Now, of course, coming together regularly, what happened is that people were starting to question me and to say, okay, everybody that is part of Brussels Creative, we were asking in terms of business model, we were asking a very little membership fee from everybody. So as an individual, as a company, as an organization, pay us a little bit of a membership fee. And that money, because we were not staffed, the non-for-profit is all based on passion, on goodwill. It's not my job where I'm paid. I'm doing that after the working hours and in the weekends, because I have my own companies to manage. But I was investing a lot of time and energy and passion into it, like many other people. And so being not staffed, we asked a little bit of membership just to pay some food and beverage when we meet together, or sometimes to rent a place. So little operating costs, and for 2 years, little by little, building that trust and that relationship. And then, of course, people started to question, how can we use that creative ecosystem and maybe start doing things together, but also look how we can obtain some more funding for our activities. Because at the end of the day, each of us, we still need some extra funding to come from somewhere, and try to show maybe to our region or to Europe that creative economy is also a platform that they can start using. It's a collective and connected intelligence that you can start to let work together for some challenges. And that's where we decided to do the next step, a little bit of investment that we decided to do, but it was to map. And mapping for me is not so much the visualization, because here you see a map with all numbers. Behind the numbers, you can dive deeper and deeper. We identified in our Brussels region around 700 people companies, organizations, that we consider being part of our creative economy. Based on just discussions and meetings that we had with them, we identified the 700, I think it was 750 places in total in Brussels. Each place would be described so that you have a profile, so that you can know what that place does, who represent that place, what they are doing in terms of discipline. And then what is important for me in terms of data intelligence, and that's more important than the visualization, we started to, the graph that you see at the bottom of the slide, we started to try to analyze who is collaborating with whom in that ecosystem, trying to link the dots. I was telling you that the main role of Brussels Creative is to create bridges amongst those people, let them learn to know and build some trust. But of course, it's important to see who starts to collaborate with whom. And by linking to this data intelligent platform, we found a company called Data Scouts, and they do data analysis, and they are constantly trying to see what all these 700 places are doing every month, what meetings they have on social media, what are they posting, with whom they collaborate. And based on that, you start to have a little bit like a pulse on your region. You see what they are talking about, who works with whom, and you have a clear picture of what your ecosystem is all about, which means that whenever I need to gather some people for, we will see, for some projects, I can easily dive in my database, make some filters, and try to build bridges amongst them and bring them together for a certain challenge. What kind of challenges? I just decided to provide you a few ones that we have been working on. For instance, what we started to say in Brussels was we should learn from each other. Brussels region is nice, we learn to know each other, but what about learning from other cities and other regions? And so in the middle of my slide, you see the innovation train. We invited people who wants to come with us. We will go for one day with the train to Paris, and we will visit the creative ecosystem of Brussels. So we had about 20 places to visit in Paris, and we split up the group. I think we were about 100 people going to there. So that was another initiative. Rather than to visit a place in Brussels, let's visit another region. We went, visited Paris for a day, and came back just to be inspired. I called often these trips my inspirational safari. We go on safari, we don't visit touristic activities, we visit the undersea, we visit the creative economy of Paris. We did the same to Berlin, we did the same to Cluj in Romania, we did the same to Aarhus in Denmark, and we did also a trip to Barcelona at a certain time. So let's propose to your region to learn from other regions, because the not reinvented syndrome is important. Sometimes other cities are beautiful examples for yourself. And then we started to look together if there were not some European calls that might be interested for Brussels Creative. You see two names from European calls on the right side and the left side. Edu Great, that was a collaboration between the region of Kiev, the region of Espoo in Finland, and the region of Brussels. We found in Creative Europe, that is a program in Europe, we found a call for proposal. We pitched, or we answered to that call for proposal, and we were chosen as a consortium between our three regions. And that brings some money suddenly in the system, because each region, I think, could benefit from around 300,000 euro per region that you could get, and that would provide to some young creative people and designers the opportunity to collaborate throughout the borders. So not only cross-disciplinary, but also cross-border. You start to see how you can collaborate with other ecosystems. And the same on the right side, it's called Wear Sustain. And so there it was about wearables. Wearables are typically the clothes, let's say the the fashion industry that you mix with technology. And that was a collaboration between the city of Eindhoven, the city of Ghent, another Belgian city, the city of Brussels, and the city of Barcelona. And so we have collaborated amongst different cities to also challenge some creative entrepreneurs to come up with creative ideas, how fashion and technology can be merged together. And on the left side of the slide, you see a little man on a bike. That was a regional challenge. We went to some ministers, and the Minister of Security, Road Security. I told to that person, that lady, that she could organize with Brussels Creative a hackathon, and the hackathon would be to invite the creative ecosystem of Brussels to come together and during 3 days to work together on a voluntary basis on creative solutions, how to make the roads more safer for bicycles and bikers in our region. So again, it's called the collective intelligence of your creative ecosystem to come up with solutions for regional problems. So regional problems, pan-European challenges and call for proposals, and sometimes safaris where we start to visit other regions. And the last example on the right side, it's the Maker Faire. Suddenly in 2019, just before the COVID, we decided as an ecosystem, we think that we need a Maker Faire. Some of you might know what it is, but the Maker Faire gathers all the makers from your city in one place for 2-3 days, and you try to show how Minecraft makers, circular economy, repair activities, how little by little it's something that is on the move, not on in the movements of the citizens. The citizens are more and more concerned about the notion of making, and so you gather them for 2-3 days in a place, and you make sure that you have stakeholders from the university, politicians, business, citizens all together for that 3-day event. Very successful. We wanted to make it over again, but the COVID gave us some challenges so that we couldn't do it in 20 and 21, but we will make a second edition in 2022, because making it online, when you talk about making, it's a bit delicate to do that online. So we are looking forward for next year. Based on what we developed in Brussels, the Brussels Creative, we were more and more connected with other cities, and we created an international non-for-profit, very informal organization, but called the Creative Ring. And that's where more and more, I think in total, we are close to 27 different regions and cities that are connected with each other. And we just try to learn from each other. We visit each other from time to time, but also throughout online meetings, we regularly try to see who could work together on a call for proposal for a European challenge. And now we create some consortiums. Fascinating to see and to discover how many beautiful creative cities and creative ecosystems you have in Europe. So a very rich initiative that also lives now since 3-4 years, where we have learned a lot. And the same mission for the Creative Ring, it's building bridges across the different cities and regions throughout Europe. It's mainly Europe, because I think that it makes the things more easier, I think, as well. Although I think what you have been doing now, creating the bridge between the Americas and Europe, is also important, because we can learn from each other. But from a operational and cultural point of view, and also these European calls are often limited to the 27, 28 regions of Europe. So that's what the Creative Ring tries to do at the European level. And it's, of course, we try to connect different places. This is a picture, by the way, of the inside of my egg. The egg is a place I was talking to you about that I've been creating. So we gather regularly people from a region in one place or from different regions. We, of course, try to see what are the technologies that can help us to easily work cross-border. So the local data mapping and data analysis is very important, and we try to have that in each city. And then we try to see how we can link all these technologies with each other. What's next? What's next? The most important for us was, after 6-7 years, to make sure that it's sustainable in its effort, that we can think about long-term Brussels creative activities. And that's where we have been asking to the political world and the authorities, could we not create a cluster, the creative economy, and place it somewhere in a public institution where you can have some staff? Because I can guarantee you that the last 6-7 years, many of us, including me, have spent an enormous amount of time and energy into building that creative economy for Brussels. And we have all our own job, so we need to be sometimes careful to protect also our own activities. And so we found a solution. There is an organization called in Brussels, hub.brussels. And in Hub Brussels, it's a cluster organization that is funded by the public authorities and that is really there to support the economy throughout several clusters. And so we now will have a cluster creative economy in which Brussels Creative will merge, and through that get a full-time access to, I think, 3 full-time people, 1 person that can work on the database, 1 person that can communicate, and 1 person that can really coordinate the activities. We will all remain and continue to contribute, but at least we know that we have now a public funding that provides us the opportunity on the long term to become sustainable. I hope that my presentation made you a little bit happy on this Thursday morning, that you enjoy. Yeah, by the way, my name is Heureux, and for the Spanish speaking people, Heureux in French means feliz. So I'm tempted always to try to make people energized, positive, and smiling. So I hope that you feel happy in the room today. If you want to contact me later on, you can always find me on LinkedIn, where you have a little bit of a link to all the activities that I've been developing the last 30 years already now. So it doesn't make me feel young, because it's already more than 30 years that I'm busy with creating and starting up stuff. If you want to be inspired, I just thought to share with you some books. I will give the slides to the organizers, so to Paula and the others. They can share it with you if you want later. And all these little logos that you see on my slides are just activities in which I'm involved today. The world of the life of an entrepreneur is not always easy. I still understand the link between all these activities and logos. Not many other people, so don't worry if you don't see the link between them. I know the link, and I can explain the story, how they were all linked over time. And that's it. That's what I wanted to share with you today as a morning opening session. I hope you have learned to know a little bit better my region, that you have learned, if you haven't done it so far yet in your region or city, what it takes to build up an ecosystem. I think make sure that you gather them, that you build trust, that you share a common vision and mission amongst the operators of your ecosystem. And then let's start them work together on regional or European or American challenges, so that there is some money coming in the machine and that it helps them to collaborate with each other. And then over time, try to connect yourself with other cities in your part of the world, or between Europe and Americas, like you're doing now. Thanks a lot for your attention.